Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about two things. One is React and Flux. Second, I'm going to talk about WPF or Xamarin Forms. And MVVM, the model view model pattern. Alrighty, so today in the mobile development world, these are probably the two biggest topics for cross-platform development. What people really need to understand is you should base your development approach or your cross-platform technologies around one thing, and that is resource. Complicated stuff again. And resources can be developers, and dev tools. So, if I am building an app in WPF or Xamarin Forms, I would usually make this decision if my developers are .NET developers or C# developers, and in React or Flux, or we should also say React Native, that's the cross-platform development, which is just using Flux. It's exactly the same. Yeah, okay, so then our developers would be web developers who use JavaScript. So if my dev team is all around the web developers, if they don't know .NET, if they don't know C#, then I would probably look at React. Now, one thing also to consider, React Native biggest disadvantage, let's get a big dirty red color. It's probably about 3 years behind Xamarin. Okay? So that's just some things to consider. So for example, with me just recently setting up a React Native project, I found that the latest version of React and the latest version of Flux had some conflicts between the node modules and it wasn't building, and there are some hiccups along the way where setting up the dev environment was quite messy. So let's dev tools are not integrated as well as Xamarin or Visual Studio and Xamarin and XAML and everything. So then also that's kind of the disadvantages with React Native. But then we also have disadvantages with sort of Xamarin Forms, and Xamarin Forms, I think to me the biggest disadvantage with it, performance on Android. And one of the most confusing topics with building apps with Xamarin is you have two approaches. You have traditional, Xamarin traditional, goodness me, oh man, let me start with traditional, and forms. So Xamarin traditional, Xamarin Forms, and we can get up to sort of around 70% code share here. We can even get up to 95% code share here. So with Xamarin Forms, you have XAML as your UI conscript, UI development, And around that XAML development, that's where you kind of get some slight performance degradation on Android, mostly on Android. So if you're building really complex user interfaces, that's where Xamarin Forms can be quite tedious and messy and start to really lose performance, especially on Android. So this is just some key topics to understand with the differences and sort of the things that are the disadvantages between the two. But Xamarin Forms is improving every single day, and I've been using it ever since it was released, and I can tell you now that these performance issues are really sort of getting wiped away. It's getting better and better, and this is where React Native, you've got to be wary of using React Native, is you have that issue around it being still quite new, and it's that 3-year benchmark behind Xamarin, so you've got to be aware of those key differences there. But mainly, I would look at it, the two key topics there, and that's your resources. And are they web developers, are they .NET developers? And that's how I would go upon making my decision between React Native and Xamarin Forms. Okay. Now, let's just clear this off. And next, we're going to look at what Flux is as an architecture. Okay, the Flux architecture, right? It has, I'm going to make this very, 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 very simple. It has components over here. It has stores here. And it also has a dispatcher over here. Dispatcher, yep. And then we'll place our actions up the top here. Alright, cool. Now, our first topic to discuss here is our components. Now what these do, all these do, fire off actions. So a component can be thought of as a view. So let's just say it's like a screen with 2 buttons. One's login, one's exit. And an action there would be is clicking the login button. And we also listen to stores. So what stores, and so stores, these guys are responsible for, actually, I'll start off with actions because we'll get to stores after actions. So actions, what these do, these are very simple, so we'll keep it simple. So they are only aware of the dispatcher here. And so when an action occurs, all it will do is it will send an action down to the dispatcher. That's all actions do. That's all we need to know. So then our dispatcher here, this is a pub sub object. What this basically means is a pattern for handling events. Cool. Okay, and so we publish events when they occur, and we subscribe or listen to particular events based on what actions you want to respond with. Okay, so that's what the dispatcher does. Now when we talk about the store here is, you see all the actions pushed to the dispatcher, all those events sent from the dispatcher to the store, every single store in the architecture will receive every single event. And then, based upon what the store wants to do, it will only handle specific events. And those specific events are based upon the requirements of the component. So if my view, for example, up here, if that needs to say when I log in, that's going to navigate to a new screen. Well, there's no re-rendering required there for the view. There's only the action of pushing to a new view. But if we have another view here which has a list of data, and then every time I click, say, a refresh button up here, what that'll do is that will send an action that will, go into the actions object, fire off that action. That will then get pushed to the component, the store for that specific component. See, this is what Redux actually improves upon, is to reduce the amount of stores required in the architecture. That's one thing that I don't like about Flux, is every component has its own store, and that's again a disadvantage like the model view model architecture, because every view must have a view model, and you get this huge amount of spaghetti code because there's so many view models. So it can get a bit messy there. So let's go back to that. So the refresh action gets pushed to the dispatcher. Then that store will listen for any of those events coming from the dispatcher, and it receives a refresh action, and it will respond with the render function. And what that render function does is it tells its component, re-render the view. And in this case, it needs to re-render a new list. So that's pretty much a basic overview of what Flux is. Now let's have a look at the model view model architecture. Probably going way over time here, so we might have to split this up into 2 videos. Okay, now this is going to be very quick and simple. So we'll have a view. We have a view model. That's pretty much it. That is literally pretty much it. So what a view model will do, and that will set up data bindings. So our view knows only about the view model. Our view model but does not know about the view. So it's not a unidirectional data flow pattern. Sorry, a multi-directional data flow pattern. It's only a unidirectional flow. So, i.e., the data is only sent to the view. The view only can listen to the view model. The view model doesn't know anything about the view. So inside here, in our XAML, we'll set up a binding, and we'll register to a property like this. I'll show you a code example eventually, but right now we're just whiteboarding this stuff. Okay, and then inside here we'll have like a public string login title. That will be obviously on one line. Oop. Login title, and that will have a get and set method. So then every single time that login title property in the view model, that every time that data updates for that property, that's when it will fire off an event to change the data being displayed on the view. And that's kind of the main difference between MVVM and Flux. Very simple stuff there for the MVVM. I'll get into more detail, but I just want to show you the key differences. Alright, for the next video we're going to see this in code, and we're going to actually build some projects and see the difference. But I just want to whiteboard this stuff so we're clear on what's actually going on, and that you understand the differences between React Native and Xamarin and WPF. Okay, thanks guys. I'll speak to you next time.